Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today you're in the channel. We're actually going to review a few movies. We're going to review Rent-A-Pal on Blu-ray from Shout Factory. We're also going to be reviewing the new Bad Boys movie, Bad Boys: Ride or Die, and the new movie that just came to Netflix, the new Richard Linklater movie, Hitman, starring Glenn Powell. So let's just dive right into it. First off, we're going to review Rent-A-Pal. This movie came out in 2020. It is directed by John Stevenson, who also wrote this film. And it stars Brian Landis Falkins and Will Wheaton. And actually, Brian Landis Falkins, along with John Stevenson, also helped to co-produce this movie. And this was actually a gift. This Blu-ray right here, this Scream Factory Blu-ray through IFC Midnight, actually was a gift from Kevin Kruger, who sent this to me because he wanted me to review it. And I'm really glad he did, because this movie is fantastic. It's very much a low-budget horror film. Actually, it's more of a thriller. This movie features two phenomenal performances, mainly the performance by Brian Landis Falkins, who plays the main character in this film, and he is just a very lonely guy. This film takes place in 1990, and back in the early 1990s, late 1980s, and for a very long time, we didn't have dating websites, and if you wanted to date somebody and you were a very shy, lonely guy, like the guy David in this movie, who's basically just caring for his mother. He lives with his mother. He lives in his mother's basement. His mother has dementia, so she's not doing too well. So for the last 10 years, he's been caring for her. This is really his only job. They get money from her Social Security, so he just basically hangs out with her, takes care of all of her needs, but they really don't have a great relationship. His father had passed away about 10 years before from suicide, which is a big deal in his life. This guy doesn't really get along with many other people. He's just a very lonely, shy guy. So he's doing this electronic dating service where essentially he goes to a store in the mall. He takes out VHSs of possible candidates that he could date, and he also films a version of himself for possible candidates who would maybe want to date him. But again, he's a very lonely, shy guy. While he's there, he notices a VHS tape called Rent-A-Pal, which features Andy, played by Will Wheaton, who might be the most recognizable actor in this film. But basically, it's the Dora the Explorer shtick, where he'll maybe fake a conversation with you. That's what this tape is all about. For a guy who can't really, connect with other people, he connects with his VHS tape. It feels like a real conversation with him. He kind of plays along with it, and, it feels like this guy actually has a friend. And this is a problem because as the movie goes on, things start to get a little bit more stranger, and it's, very weird. He's friends with basically somebody in a VHS tape. This is not a real human being that's interacting with him, but, this is really dealing with mental illness, and this guy, David, because he hasn't interacted with regular human beings in so long, he is just so lonely. He just wants that human connection. And even when he could possibly have a real connection with a real woman, he's still kind of committed to Andy. And this is where things really just get out of hand and get darker and scarier. And this movie, it is very uncomfortable to watch. But what I love about this movie, especially if you're a physical media collector, first of all, we're seeing a lot of VHS tapes, the VHS, the film in the tape itself. All that stuff is really cool. They actually really did capture the early 1990s, I think, in a great way. I don't think that this is a flawless film. The low budget of it all really does show on screen. We don't have too many we don't have too many characters, but really our lead character, and he did actually win some awards for this, but I feel like if this movie was seen even more, Brian Landis Falkins gives a phenomenal performance in this movie. Really, just some of the best work you will see in a horror movie. And he used to really do a lot of the heavy lifting. I saw a lot of people complimenting Will Wheaton's performance, and he is great as well, but his performance is just in this one VHS tape. It's all done in one, basically in one sitting, so I imagine his job wasn't as hard as what Brian Landis Falkins had to do in his role. He really is doing all of the heavy lifting. He's got all of the emotional arc in this movie. He has to be scary. You have to feel sympathy for this guy, and I think his performance really is phenomenal. I really did enjoy this movie. It will leave you feeling very uncomfortable and a little bit dirty, but I still really did think this was a fantastic film. The Blu-ray itself is also really good from Scream Factory. Thank you so much for this, Kevin. I really do appreciate you sending this to me. It really does mean a lot, and I really am glad because, it also features some good special features on this, including a making of, which, for a low-budget film like this, it really does help for you to get into the minds of the director and the actors and what they were going through and the producers in making this movie, because it does feel like the kind of passion project that you can really appreciate that somebody put their heart and soul into making this movie and it ended up being a really good, really phenomenal movie. Really though, the acting is what stands out the most to me. The production itself, I really do think they captured the early 1990s. It's got good cinematography. The DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 on this Blu-ray is actually really well done, mixed very, very, very well, especially for a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1. I really was surprised at how well that was done. I really think that could be credited to Scream Factory. And IFC Midnight, IFC in general, they do put out some good films, so I really did appreciate that as well. And I just think it's something that if you've never seen this film, and it feels like a lot of people haven't, definitely worth your time and money. And like I said, you can get this Scream Factory Blu-ray, which I really did appreciate. So again, thank you so much, Kevin. And we also had 2 new releases that came out this week that I just wanted to touch on a little bit. The first one, and it's a pretty big deal, is Bad Boys Ride or Die, the 4th film in the Bad Boys franchise. This one, again, wasn't directed by Michael Bay. It was directed by Abel and Bilal, who directed Bad Boys for Life, which, they really missed the opportunity, and they know that this one really should have been called Bad Boys for Life, and the previous one should have been called Bad Boys Ride or Die, but they didn't expect that movie to be as successful as it was. It's still the highest grossing film of 2020, given the movie theaters were closed for most of the year, and Bad Boys for Life just kind of squeaked in at the beginning of the year and ended up being the highest grossing film of 2020. And a lot of people weren't really hyped up for this movie, or at least I felt like Sony didn't promote this movie enough. First of all, it's released under the Columbia Pictures banner, just like the previous films were, even though it is technically a Sony release. And we're bringing back Will Smith. This isn't actually the first movie he's done after the slap, but I don't think Sony was promoting this as much because it stars Will Smith, and a lot of people probably still aren't too high on him. This movie ended up making $56 million at the domestic box office and $104 million worldwide, which is more than Furiosa, so people still came out for the Bad Boys Ride or Die experience, and I really do appreciate that. First of all, it was a great movie theater experience checking this one out. Not so much the crowd I was with. About 8 kids halfway through this movie came out, and they just had a full-blown conversation, just talking with each other, throwing popcorn at each other. And then they left about 20 minutes after, so I'm guessing the movie that they saw finished up, and they just decided to come hang out in Bad Boys Ride or Die and not care about anybody else. And this is another reason why people don't go to the movie theaters, because the younger generation, they don't seem to respect movie theater etiquette. I just don't know who raised these people. Like, you come into a movie theater and you have a full-blown conversation just playing on your phones. Man, if I was their parents, they would never be allowed in a movie theater again. Let's just put it that way, because that was ridiculous. But other than that, had a phenomenal experience. I loved seeing Will Smith's Mike Lowry on the big screen again, and seeing Martin Lawrence's Marcus Burnett. I love seeing them. They still have great chemistry, and they are still the standout of this movie. And the action really stood out. I love what they were doing with the cameras, the cinematography. It was all so well done. My only issue with this movie really is in the plot and story of it. They tried to find a clever way to, really add some character depth to Marcus's character and, kind of change the dynamic between him and Mike Lowry a little bit, just so it doesn't get stale. And I appreciated that. But because they were trying to get us there, I feel like the first third of this movie, they kind of took some leaps and they didn't really stick the landing for me. They did something in the first third that I'm not going to spoil. That doesn't necessarily work entirely for me. But luckily, the second and third act do a great job picking this up. And like I said, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, they still have great chemistry. You're going to still have some great laughs in there. I do feel like this is the worst Bad Boys movie, but I still feel like every Bad Boys movie has been consistently good. They all have their flaws, but all of them still also have their pros. And I really think this movie had a lot more pros than it did have cons. And I really still enjoyed my time checking out Bad Boys Ride or Die. And it's one I'm really glad that people went out and saw it in theaters. I hope you guys got to check it out in theaters, because that is absolutely the best way to check it out. Again, not a flawless film. All of my flaws kind of come from the first third of the movie. They even have that cheap looking cinematography, and you can clearly tell that there's a set piece in the first third that, looks like a set, and it looks pretty bad. But again, they get away from all that. If you've seen some of the making ofs, the things that they're doing with the cameras, I absolutely loved. I thought that stuff was all so well done. And if you like Bad Boys for Life, they bring back a lot of the same characters from that movie. I just feel like the worst part of this movie is the plot, and, that's a little bit unfortunate, but that's not the only reason you go to a Bad Boys movie. So I'd say definitely check this one out. And then on Netflix, we got a movie directed by Richard Linklater, and this movie premiered last year in September at the Venice Film Festival, so Netflix ended up picking it up. And I think a lot of people expected this, to be put in theaters last year. It had good reviews, but Netflix ended up pushing the release date to this past Friday, June 7th. And this movie stars Glen Powell, and this really is a vehicle for Glen Powell. I believe he actually co-wrote this movie with Richard Linklater. Richard Linklater is one of the greatest directors of all time. He's probably most famous for School of Rock or Dazed and Confused, but this is also the guy who wrote the Before trilogy, directed Waking Life, directed Boyhood. So Richard Linklater is a great Suburbia. This guy is a great director, and I was always wondering how he was going to put his little twist on a movie like this, which seems like a very straightforward rom-com type of movie with a bit of action thrown in there. That's what this trailer, at least for this movie, looked like, because they'll show you the trailer on Netflix. But Richard Linklater likes to make a lot of philosophical movies, which really kind of attracts me to him. A lot of walk and talking movies. He really concentrates on character development, and they really did that in this movie as well, while also just putting out a very, very entertaining film and showing off that Glen Powell, he is one of our great up-and-coming actors. I feel like he's already arrived. You know, really, he kind of got on people's radar with Top Gun Maverick, but this is him showing off his acting chops, because he plays not a real hitman, even though it's called Hitman. He actually plays a college professor who, on his free time, because he's a single guy, he's divorced, on his free time, he just likes to get into people's heads, so he kind of works with the police in these sting operations to figure out people who are hiring hitman to kill somebody else. So somebody has to play the hitman, and early in the movie, the character who usually would play this, you know, he's gets taken off the job, he gets suspended, so they send in Glen Powell, and Glen Powell, he's a natural at this, playing a hitman. He's like changing up the characters, trying to fit the mold of what the people he's trying to basically arrest, he's trying to fit the mold of what they expect a hitman to be. So he's basically an actor, and you get some really funny moments in here. You get Glen Powell just showing off, and then of course, you know, it's not that straightforward of a movie, so eventually, you know, something happens. One of the people who is coming to him to hire a hitman, he you know, kind of ends up having a little bit of a relationship with her, and he finds a way to let her go. And then basically from there, we get ourselves a movie. And this is where all the plot twists start to happen. Her husband, who she was apparently going to have killed, well, you know, something happens with him as well. And this is, again, I don't want to spoil nothing for you guys, so I want you to check this one out on Netflix if you can. You know, I think it's also going to get a Blu-ray release, which is pretty cool. I don't know if that's true or not. I just saw something while I was scrolling down X, and that would be really awesome, because I do think this is a movie that could have definitely come to movie theaters and been really enjoyed. It doesn't feel like your straightforward Netflix film. The cinematography is actually pretty damn well done. All the acting is so good. It's written phenomenally, and I really, really enjoyed this movie. I actually enjoyed this movie more than Bad Boys for Life, so if I would have saw this in theaters, I would have absolutely loved it. But this is the kind of movie that does get watched at home on Netflix with your significant other. She's going to enjoy it. He's going to enjoy it as well. It's just a fun movie. I really had a blast, and it really just showed you how good of an actor Glen Powell is. That's really what this movie is. It's a vehicle for him, but he's such a good actor that you're going to absolutely love it, and I really did enjoy this movie, and I can't believe that I enjoyed it more than Bad Boys Ride or Die, which really does surprise me, but I gotta be honest, I thought Hitman was such a clever movie, a very well done movie. Is it Richard Linklater's best movie? No, but it's still a movie that if you're at home, and you want to watch it just on any night, I really think you're going to have a blast with it, so I definitely can recommend you check out Hitman, available right now on Netflix. Even though it's a physical media channel, I still recommend you guys check out this movie, because it is definitely worth your time. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it here for me on another episode of Let's Talk. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like it, don't forget to share, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We also have channel memberships, so if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer like John Doe Juggler, Jason Martin, and Mr. Smelly Potato, or a director like Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews, you guys can do that. You can find all that information in the description below. But if you guys got no money to throw away, we don't mind at all. We just hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.